I can't with him. I just can't. I can't. In the best way. I just can't. I don't even know what that means. Hello everybody! Welcome to the Cecilia Music YouTube channel. Once again, my name is Taylor. I kind of go by the stage name Cecilia though for my contemporary music. So I'm very, very excited to be back after an 11-month hiatus of not making as many videos. And the primary reason for that was mental and physical well-being stuff that I was kind of going through the ringer with for a while. I talked about that a lot in my first reaction video back, which was to an Aurora song called Your Blood. It was a super fun video to make, and it gives a little bit more of an explanation in case any of you were curious about where I was at, what I was up to during that time. But I will leave that for the previous video and I won't include too much of that explanation here. The main thing that I did want to say though, as a quick moment of appreciation for all of you who have commented on that video has the sweetest comments on it. Thank you so much for welcoming me back so warmly. Thank you so much for making me feel so welcome back on the platform and so happy to be back. I absolutely love talking about music. And so the fact that you guys were there with me, that you clicked on the video, that you gave the video some engagement after such a long hiatus just meant so much to me. And it just goes to show that we still have something really great here with this channel that we're gonna keep trying to grow and build as time goes on. So that being said, if you enjoy this reaction / a little bit of analysis, or if you enjoy any of our other content, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And then I also have a little bit more about my mental health journey and kind of about my musical projects that I do, quote unquote, out in the real world on my own personal Instagram page, which is called Gonzaga. So it's under my actual name. And so we'll link that Instagram page down below. If you're interested, give me a follow. If you're more interested in kind of the goings on of other things, other musical projects happening and other life things. And if you're interested in following us on Instagram officially through the company, you can also find us via the username Opera Cecilia. We're going to be diving into our reaction, and this is another mainstay artist of the channel, a person I love to talk about. He's fantastic. He is such an incredible vocalist, and he is a big reason why our channel, our reaction channel, is continuing to grow. So this is for all the Dimash fans out there. We did an Aurora video to welcome us back into the channel. Now we're doing Dimash, and then the next one's going to be an Angelina. And then as soon as I'm done with 3 of my more mainstay artists, we're going to be introducing some new artists to the channel to talk about as well, which I'm super excited about. We're going to dive into his 2021 performance. I think it's his most recent of the song SOS. I'm more familiar with his earlier interpretations of this song, so this performance in particular is a little bit newer to me, but I did see in the comment section below, there's a comment that says, "I'm French and find it amazing that since the first time he sang this, he has now even corrected some of the small mispronunciations he made in the first version that made him famous." This is a well-known song in France interpreted by it looks like Daniel Bellavoine, I hope I pronounced that right. Written specifically for him to match his unusual vocal range, Dimash has managed to make subtle pronunciation improvements in his first version that only French people would pick up on. So in case you didn't already know based off of that, this song is sung in the French language, which is notoriously difficult to pronounce for people who may not be which is notoriously difficult to pronounce for people who may not be from French heritage. That being said, it is an absolutely gorgeous language. Some of the most beautiful music in the world was written in that language, in my opinion. So I'm super excited to see his most updated interpretation. And I love the fact that he's an artist that's always in growth mindset, if all of that is indeed true, which I'm sure it is. That was a really wonderful comment to me.
Pourquoi je meurs? Pourquoi je ris? Pourquoi je pleure? Voici le SOS d'un derrière en détresse. Sur toi, je
excited as soon as I heard that low note, because that was one of the things that like was the most incredible about the performance before. The fact that this man is able to jump ranges, jump registers in his voice so easily and so flawlessly is like one of the most incredibly impressive things about this performance and about any of the things that I have heard him do in performance. And the fact that this is all completely live, like that's a difficult thing to do in general, like in the studio in a less anxious environment, but then you put an audience in front of it and he's just so good at doing that even in the most pressurized situations. And so that's a testimony to his professionalism as well as his ability to obviously sing very, very effectively in every part of his range. But I want to talk a little bit, because I'm a thematic girly, I want to talk a little bit about the theming. The beginning of it is, it translated to English, why do I laugh, why do I cry? Here is the SOS of an earthling in distress. And so he's talking about an inhabitant of Earth that is in distress, that is hurting. Those are very vulnerable emotions. And so he's naturally going to expressively let some of the air through a little bit more. That's why you hear more of an airiness at the beginning. He doesn't have to do that. Most vocalists know that they don't have to do that. If you do depend on a lot of escaping air like that in order to produce any sound, that's usually something you would work on in voice lessons to make sure that that's not the consistent default. But that's not what's happening here, because later on in the performance, he proves that he can sing in that register and in all registers with incredible clarity. What he's doing is adding it in for the sake of expression. He is singing as a very, very vulnerable character right now. Like the number one thing that kind of pops into my head is like, you know, like a baby deer after they're first born and they're scared in the woods, like that vulnerability of like an animal or an inhabitant of Earth that is seeing kind of Earth fall apart all around them, or seeing what human beings might be doing to the planet, and is completely vulnerable and feels powerless to it. And so the only thing that they can do is express themselves the best they possibly can and communicate their emotions to the rest of the world. And that's what he's doing here at the beginning. In addition to that, he's also not putting all of his eggs in one basket too quickly. So he's holding back a lot for the sake of making the grand finale of the performance at the end even more interesting. And then you get that low note, which is absolutely incredible. We're gonna listen to that one more time, because that's just like, that gives me chills every single time I hear it. Okay, so what he says there is that, let me pull up the translation one more time to make sure I get this right. I've never had my feet on the ground. So he starts really low and then goes all the way up to that high. And so basically he's expressively using different registers of his voice. And this was also like very, very masterfully written by the original composer. But he's using different registers of his voice to basically mimic a bird taking flight, and his feet are rooted into the ground at first, but he expresses a desire to have never wanted to be on the ground in the first place. And so he's taking off, and all of the sudden we're up in the stratospheric part of his range, up in that, what the contemporary world sometimes calls falsetto. It's kind of a head voice countertenor range. That's sort of what we would label it as in the classical music world, because he's using kind of more of an operatic technique up there. I need to do a little bit more research on his background, I think, because I would love to know what his training background is or how he developed as an emerging artist, because it's such masterful control over his instrument. And I'm sure a lot of it is like, of course, raw talent as well. Like you're gifted some, but singing is very, very much a skill. And I always want to emphasize that in my videos. Like, these people put years of work into this craft. And so I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, because this is somebody with an incredible work ethic and an incredible mastery over his instrument. And that is like the most commendable thing in the world to me, even more than like what having raw talent would necessarily be, even though a lot of his abilities come from raw talent. Of course, that's what you possess first. So anyway, So much going on there, but basically he's mimicking a bird taking flight. That's what it feels like melodically, and he's able to demonstrate that with the depth of when he's rooted in the ground at the bottom of the phrase and going into more of that baritone register and then lightening it up, but letting it cascade up into that beautiful countertenor range at the top and letting it be more full up there so that it feels fully supported. And it's showing the fact that he never truly wanted to be on the ground, that he flourishes the most up high. And that completely 100% goes with the narrative of the song, because his next part, he's all the way up there and he says, "I'd rather be a bird."
Je te jure, confondez la vie avec le bon dessiné. Ce qu'on nous envie, tu me t'as ma force. Je sens quelque chose qui m'attire.
So if you'll notice, he has this big operatic note that he just did because he's setting the tone for the next section of the song. So his very first phrase after that big note is, "I have always confused life. I've always confused certain things." He's starting as a creature of this earth to become more powerful during the course of this song. And this is Dimash really, really playing into how masterfully written this piece was. I have to acknowledge the composer and the original artist of this piece too, because man, is this piece expressive, and it requires a singer of his caliber in order to tackle it so that it's as dramatically effective as it actually can be. And what I love about this too is, man, is the production going to help you become extremely moved by the performance. So we also have to commend the backing instrumentalists, the band, and all of these incredible set pieces and projections that are happening that are all supporting him. But the thing that I love the most about Dimash is that he doesn't need any of it. All of it is absolutely incredible and creates for this like sensory overload in like the best possible way that we absolutely love in a performance like this. He also stands alone, and his vocals in this performance prove that he can stand alone. Like, he is the main act and everything else is completely supporting and reinforcing this beautiful performance that he's giving. And that's a performer that can really perform in any environment with access to any level of resources and still completely flourish. I'm just going to be gushing about him this entire video, by the way, so if you were looking for like a more critical analysis, this may not be the place, because I just love what he does so much, and I think that he's one of the few artists that I see that's like truly spilling their guts on stage. And I'll elaborate on that, what I mean by that, a little bit more later in the video when we get to some of the more kind of grand finale parts of the song. Notice how that high note was different from the previous high note. The previous high note had a lot more of an operatic quality to it. This one has a little bit more of a rock quality to it. So he changed genres on us slightly. So this just shows how incredibly masterful he is at his talent. What he is doing here is expressing a completely different emotion. This is like a cry for anguish, and it's a little bit less, I'm transitioning into a different part of the song, I'm growing in power. It's more the anguish that can come with that power. If you are able to kind of like follow along with the English translation in the video, it says, "I have yearnings for metamorphosis. I feel something that draws me upward." And so he's going upward in pitch as he's talking about being drawn upward to like a higher plane of existence, being more powerful than he maybe felt at the beginning of the song, because he is essentially playing a character in this piece. I feel like everybody does. Even if a character is not completely etched out with clarity in the same way that it would be in an opera musical, you're still playing a character in every single piece that you sing, but you kind of create the character yourself if it's not from a larger work. What I love that he does though is he uses a genre switch, and it's really just like a soft palette difference and the ability to kind of prevent your vibrato from happening a little bit. I hate to say that because vibrato is a natural, beautiful, fluid part of the voice that you should encourage to happen. You can't artificially create it, but if you just allow yourself to release tension, usually it will come naturally. But he allowed a lot of vibrato to happen earlier. He doesn't here for stylistic purposes. He turns that off a little bit, goes a little bit more straight tone, and then it comes across more in a hard rock way instead of in a classical way. And that's basically a vowel shift in addition to a vibrato shift. So not only is he going straight tone, but I would argue that he's actually flattening the soft palate instead of lifting the soft palate in the same way that you would to make the note sound more operatic. So the back of the roof of your mouth kind of creates more of a dome shape when you're trying to create that rounder operatic sound, and use a little bit more of the front when you're using a rock sound instead. So these are very deliberate stylistic choices that he's making to convey different emotions in the piece.
Pourquoi je vis? Pourquoi je meurs? Pourquoi je ris? Pourquoi je pleure?
I love that moment because that was a completely expressive moment. He was mimicking the sound of a bird. And that's why I think the bird wings kind of show up on the back to sort of mimic or reinforce that imagery as well. But he's mimicking the sound of a bird, and it's so beautiful. And it's kind of, once again, that bird taking flight because he's creating that echo effect with his voice. He's essentially doing a massive crescendo at the beginning and then a decrescendo toward the end. So he's swelling the sound, making the sound really, really loud at the beginning, and then diminuendoing or decrescendoing, which is basically bringing the sound back in and making it quieter toward the end. What I love about that is how expressive dynamics are with the voice and how it's also helping his sustainability throughout the performance, because the voice was never meant to stay static. We're supposed to sing dynamically. We're supposed to be in a state of movement when we sing. And he uses the dynamics for expressive purposes, but also for functionality purposes too. I also like how he leaned back vocally a little bit. He wasn't going as big or as incredibly powerful as he could be in that middle section of the song leading up to the operatic high note once again. And he kept that high note a little bit rounder. In my opinion, he used it more operatically there because he knew he was going to go even higher and he wanted to set up that acoustical space for that. Your mouth shape determines how much room you have to make those high notes really resonate, and setting yourself up for it with a note before it is really important. But once again, this is a perfect example of the fact that technique and expression are very, very closely related to each other and kind of one and the same when you master your instrument this well. Your technique becomes expressive. It doesn't just become you over analyzing something on stage. It becomes automatic defaults. He understands the schema and the plan, and he's enacting it incredibly masterfully because he's really experienced at what he does. And once again, that's a very well cultivated skill. This is one of my favorite parts of the song. And one of the reasons why I love the way that he approaches this is because I don't think animalistic noises are that far away from what we do when we sing. And I think there's some of the most unhinged, absolutely beautiful noises that you could possibly make. And he's mimicking nature. And he's showing we are nature in and of ourselves. Like, we're creating these calls, these cries for help, these moments of emotional catharsis, and communicating those things in the same way that anybody else in the animal kingdom would. And what I absolutely love about him too is how he has this dichotomy about him of being so incredibly human, but a lot of people talk about how his vocals are so good that they swear this guy is not human. He is. And that's the most beautiful part of it, is this is what human beings are capable of. Like, it's so cool that we have people who can communicate this way artistically. And I think one of the big reasons why people like him are so moving to people and so impressive and so incredibly memorable is how unhinged in the most beautiful way this performance is. We access inner liberation, we access freedom through artists. That's the reason why art exists, because it expresses things that we don't feel like just words can accurately express. It brings out emotions in us that we feel have to be repressed by societal expectations. One of the things that is also incredibly riveting about him is how unafraid he is to not sound polished at times for the sake of expression. That's why he lets the excess air in. That's why not everything has to be at max efficiency or technicality all the time. It's very liberating for me personally to watch artists like this, having been trained in the opera world, because in the United States, when you're trained at a university or conservatory, oftentimes it can sort of feel like you're a singer that has to be put into a box or a category. It almost feels like you're becoming an artist that is supposed to be on an assembly line or in a factory, instead of actually becoming an artist that is individual and distinctive. And it's weird because a lot of the golden age singers that we idolize as we're growing up as emerging artists were famous because they were incredibly distinctive, and yet we're being taught to kind of sound the same. That's how it felt to me, at least, because I have a unique voice for the opera world, and instead of that being nurtured, I sort of felt like I was being forced to sound a certain way that didn't feel natural to me. So artists like him that really play to the natural strengths of their voices and have a true mastery of their instrument, but aren't afraid to be big and theatrical and really spill their guts on stage, that's the most liberating thing in the world. It's the kind of music that really, really deeply provides emotional catharsis for people. I can't with him. I just can't. I can't, in the best way. I just can't. I don't even know what that means. What he did with that last finale section of the song is so emotionally thrilling. And I think the reason why is because he's really embodied this character that's sort of, based off of the lyrics that I was seeing in the translation, confused by their existence. Why do I laugh? Why do I cry? Why do I feel all of these deep emotions? What purpose are they for? And I think it's really easy in this world to feel purposeless. Like, why do we exist? What's going on? What is our trajectory? Why does death happen? You know, why does new life happen? Like, all of these questions that we have that never seem to have a 100% like clear, satisfactory answer. And I don't know if they ever really will. All of that confusion and frustration in a character in a world that is suffering in some ways and feels very dark in some ways, and yet there's incredible beauty that can be created out of the resilience of existing in a world like this. And this artistic beauty that can be created out of resilience is very much magnified in art of this nature and singers who can convey art like this. What I loved is he had this big, anguishing, incredible dynamic performance in the finale where he's calling upon more of his chest voice, but then he goes to those rounded out vowels again to get that beautiful upper register. Just a rangy singer. So he has a very, very special and very rare instrument in that sense. But what I loved is he went back to that piano dynamic at the end. He went back to that vulnerable place and he left it there because it demonstrates that dichotomy of feeling extremely powerful in this world as this majestic beautiful creature, but extremely vulnerable at the same time. I get so many nature references in this piece, like a bald eagle being very vulnerable to the environment around them and the destruction of the land around them, but at the same time is this powerful, powerful bird of prey, and like the emotional and like physical dichotomy in that. I get those images a lot. I get a fawn that turns into a stag. I don't know. I'm crazy with the things that I think of when I listen to music, but I think that's part of the reason why I have a YouTube channel and why you guys like listening to what I have to say, is because I just always feel like I'm filled to the brim with things to say about art that's as incredible as this. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for sticking around with our channel after the break. Thank you so much for just being here and for going on the nerdy journey with me. And I will catch you all in another video next time. See you again soon. Bye.